If you go into the auditorium of the Palais Garnier in Paris, France, you will notice that there's this giant chandelier hanging right over the middle of the orchestra section. So, on May 20th, 1896, during our performance, a counterweight to this giant chandelier fell right through the ceiling and killed a concierge during a performance on her first day of work. Yeah. Some odd years later, a journalist turned novelist named Gaston Leroux took this incident and went, hey, what if there was some nefarious being behind this whole chandelier thing? What if it wasn't a counterweight? What if it was the entire chandelier that fell? What would motivate such a nefarious being? I'm gonna do all this research and write this ballin' mystery novel, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be a classic of modern literature. And it was not. At all. It's not. It's not great literature. But it certainly merits discussion. Phantom of the Opera is Nola's Miserables. It was not a sensation in its day, and he has spawned countless movies, musicals, comic books, children's books, capades, reimaginings including but not limited to Phantom of the Megaplex, Phantom of the Ritz, Phantom of Hollywood, gravel from the and rule low stage of way along out the zero one you want for such a nothing little book. It's had a lot of adaptations. But the character of the Phantom varies a lot, from really genuinely engaging to the most boring thing that's ever dried your brain to a fine powder. He's evil, he's sympathetic, he's the villain, he's the anti-hero, sometimes he's even the hero. And owing to me long history of Phantom fandom, I could probably do a 26-part Ken Burns style epic on all of the many facets of this book and its adaptations and who influenced what and what now, but difficult it is for me not to go on 11 tangents. This episode is about the character of Eric, and I'm not going to lie and say a lot of me criticisms don't stem from honored rage standpoint. They totally do, but here we go. Instead of a comprehensive 30-hour dissection, which I could totally do, we're going to keep it to 2 parts. Eric, the Phantom of the Opera, before the musical and after. Intro. The original novel is pulpy. It's told from Leroux's point of view, as a man who's trying to piece together this mystery that happened 30 years after the fact. And though you, the modern reader, know from cultural osmosis that yes, there is a phantom, the first half of this book is basically a mystery with a ton of red herrings that are actually pretty tedious from a storytelling standpoint. Who could the phantom be? Is it the stage hand? Is it the rat catcher? Is it this Persian fellow who's sneaking about all the time? And about halfway through the book we find out that yes, there is indeed a dude who calls himself the opera host, and that it's his basically full-time job. Literally, he even extorts the opera managers to the tune of about 20,000 francs a month. Mr. Phantom goes by the name of Eric. No surname. He's like Madonna. Eric is described as having the ugliest face of any person who's ever lived. He basically looks like a death's head, sort of a living corpse. He compensates for this by being an amazing genius at everything. He's a master musician. He's a ventriloquist. He can throw his voice. He's a genius architect. He's a master assassin. A master assassin. And he has the most beautiful voice of any man who's ever lived. What can't he do? Well, turns out he's not so good with the ladies, and is a huge drama queen. Like, oh, my mamma didn't love me. I sleep in a casket. I have a literal torture chamber in my house for some reason. Hey, young girl, I'm gonna kidnap you and force you to live in me lair until you fall in love with me. That seems reasonable. The Phantom of the Opera is a Beauty and the Beast tale, but it has more in common with the Myth of Hades and Persephone. Eric is frequently compared to death-like things in the novel, and he quite literally lives in an underworld. And he absconds with this innocent young girl, a novice singer in the opera named Kriston. Speaking to her from behind her mirrors in her dressing room, he tells her, hey, I'm a literal angel sent to you be your dead father to train you to sing, which she, being super religious, is like, okay, that sounds legit. So she's pretty disappointed to find out that he's actually kind of like a crazy, deformed person. But Eric is also super jealous of Christine's childhood sweetheart. They come to Raoul de Chagny, and the novel comes to a head when Raoul and the Persian descend into the Phantom's underworld to rescue Christine, only immediately to get Oopsie Daisy caught in Eric's torture chamber, which he has. And Eric thinks this is great, more to blackmail Christine with. He's like, hey girl, either you marry me or I'm gonna kill these two and blow up the entire opera, and both of us. What a prize! So let's talk about Eric's character arc, which is the most important aspect of the story to me, and the thing that most of the adaptations screw the pooch on. Christine says, "Okay, I'll marry you," which obviously she really does not want to do, but will do this incredibly selfless thing if it means saving other people's lives. But the fact that she does this kind of does him in, and she even kisses him because she really does feel sorry for him. And so Eric, surprised and completely done in by her selflessness, lets her Raoul and the Persian go. She marries Raoul, and Eric dies alone. And the book ends with the author contending that, despite his deeds, Eric was not an inherently bad person, and could have been a great person if the world hadn't been so shitty to him, and that he did not deserve to be demonized, but there were many circumstances, some within his control but many not, that made him the way he was, that he wasn't a monster, but a flawed human. So that's actually pretty sophisticated moral for a turn-of-the-century pulp horror novel. Let's see what Hollywood does with that. When you think of Universal Monsters and Phantom of the Opera, this is that version. In fact, far as Monster Phantom goes, the Lloyd Webber musical, he's a misunderstood sex god, so we not counting that Lon Chaney is the definitive version. This was actually not the first film version. There was one in 1916, but as is the case with about 90 of all silent films, this one was lost, and we don't really know all that much about it. So for the purposes of this little YouTube video, 1925 is the first movie. Like book Eric, Chaney's Eric is highly emotional and really just a little too upfront with his feelings. Oh good, that's really appealing. And she then immediately runs on in the casket he sleeps in, and he's like, yep, it is what it is, baby. This movie isn't just important as an adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, but is also a seminal piece of pop culture and Hollywood history in the horror genre, not to mention a landmark in makeup and effects work, and well worth checking out. The scene where Kristen first unmasks Eric and then he comes at her. Critics at the time reported hearing screams in the screening, and some patrons even fainted or left the theater because they were so horrified by Lon Chaney's makeup. Although that weird little cloth thing on his mask does detract from his menace a bit. I wouldn't call it the best of the movie adaptations, except for that ending. Early in the novel, the corpse of a stagehand named Boquet, who'd been garroted, is found in the cellar. In the movie, Boquet's got a brother, and there, and obviously hastily added in, hey, this guy killed my brother and I found out where he lives off screen somewhere, ending. Like in the novel, Kristine's like, please let them go, I'll do whatever, and Eric like, okay, and he does let them go. And then when Kristine's petting on Raoul and Eric, over here kinda grumpy and then busts in the angry mob, and suddenly there's a chase scene and we re on a wild carriage ride and dang. So obviously in the book, Eric is a lot more sympathetic, but his rival, Raoul, is a lot less so. He is a whinny, self-centered little baby. In the movie, Raoul is more of a conventional, dashing, straightforward movie hero, and Eric is a monster. Both of them become less complex, and that element in the original novel that contemplates on Eric's humanity and what made him into a monster. Screw that. But even so, There's a great case to make for Lon Chaney's Eric as purer and simple the best performance. He walks this great fine line of sympathetic, terrifying, childlike eccentric, and all through facial expression and body language. He's really genuinely horrifying, and yet he's so expressive, except for the stupid ending. Okay, guys, I've got a grenade. It's... I'm just kidding. Hey, we have fun. It was also originally going to end like the book, and Lon Chaney himself was purportedly not wild about this change. But, it's early Hollywood and villainous characters aren't allowed to have redemption arcs or growth or depth. So, by Eric. Next. This movie is considered one of the greats of early Chinese cinema. It was lost to the ages during the Cultural Revolution, and was only found again in 1998. This one is a first in the trend of the Phantom getting disfigured after the fact rather than from birth, which I take slight umbrage with, but we'll get to that. The Phantom in this one is a dude named Song Danping, and Christine in this version appears to be a dude. His name is Song, and promises to train him so that he can sing to Song's lady love, who has been driven mad because she thinks Song is dead. So, Song teaches Song to sing. Song teaches Song to sing. I swear, I'm not making this up. This movie has a big subplot about a leftist revolutionary movement, and most of the romance storyline is told in flashbacks. Song's lady love is not a singer. Instead, she's in what appears to be a madhouse. Song is also a lot more sympathetic than the Chaney version, or even the book version for that matter, as it really plays up the romance angle and his tragic fall. Hey, the Phantom was hot at one point. Although, true to form, our Phantom is a huge drama queen. And I know this is pretty much par for the course as far as acting in early Chinese cinema goes, but I am just saying it works where the Phantom is concerned. I can't even stand bad feelings. But even with our more sympathetic Phantom, the movie still ends like the fucking Lon Chaney movie, and the Kristen analog ends up with Song. But it doesn't matter now. Nothing matters except you and me, Kristen. Now you sing all you want, but only for me. This was Universal's big, lavish, big-budgeted remake of the 1925 version, but like its rewrite adult predecessor, you can kind of see the cracks. Claude Rains plays Rick Cloden, who's a retiring star violinist at the opera. In the original screenplay, he was going to be Christine's father, and that's why, rather than teaching her to sing himself, he spends his life savings on singing lessons for her. Knowing this makes the movie make more sense, but they cut out the father angle. So instead, he's just this weird old guy who's oddly fixated on this own girl with no real context as to why. You were you. You were not in any trouble. But this Phantom also has a tragic life, and he has a super sympathetic backstory up until up and murders a guy over a misunderstanding. And then we get the acid in the face, and hot damn with the crazy. I suppose the implication was that this version, he was always kind of on the edge, and then here was the snapping point. So when, towards the end, he gets Kristen down in his lair, it's like, I warned them. I warned them. I told them there'd be death and destruction if they didn't let you sing. Well, that escalated quickly. But then the focus shifts entirely. After the acid sploosh, Eric isn't in the movie much at all, and for the most part we follow the not one but two Raoul's, trying to figure out what's going on. Why is he so obsessed with this girl he's had basically no contact with? There's a lot of reading between the lines with this phantom's motivation. If he is her dad, then why is he not in her life? If not, what's his deal? Is he just thinks she's cute? What made him snap and kill that guy over basically nothing? Does he have a history of stuff like this? And that's why he lives alone and tries to stay out of Kristen's life. In the end, the movie just ends abruptly with death by falling rocks, and everyone just kind of shrugs and moves on. In the end, I'm left wondering what the filmmakers were even going for. Next, I shall teach you. When you sing, it will be only form. This version is trying to be scary, and it's boring. It's really boring. There's the theft of his music during / after his disfigurement, which once again only where in the 1943 version it was a perceived theft, this time it is alleged theft by the opera. Also, like in the 43 version, we get not one but two Raouls, only this time one of the Raouls is a bad guy. One with a dashing yet boring love interest. The other's just kind of, rapey, and I guess he's there to make the Phantom look more sympathetic by comparison. See, the Phantom may be a total jerkwad, but at least he's not an attempted rapist like this guy. So, you are dining with Ambrose Darcy tonight. Be warned, he's a vile and vicious man. Don't let him be creepy and possessive. Let me be creepy and possessive. This is also the only version where the chandelier fall is an accident, and rather than causing it, he pushes Kristen into safety, sacrificing himself, and that's how the movie ends. So it's interesting to note that of the ones we've covered, the American versions all have a monstrous, villainous Eric getting punished at the end, and the non-American ones have a more sympathetic, complex version. This one is British. That's not to say a more complex tick isn't doable by American filmmakers, but maybe it just needs to be done outside of the studio system. Babel, have you ever seen me music again? Not here, not anywhere. Do you understand? Never again. Phantom of the Paradise takes place in a sort of surreal alternate universe at a club called the Paradise. It's all of Brian De Palma's earliest movies. It's a musical, and it's probably the best of all of the Phantom movies, and it's also probably my favorite De Palma. Easy. Say what you want about Phantom of the Paradise. It knows what it's about. This movie isn't for a penny, for a pound. But I am innocent. Swan stole me music and framed me. In a way, it's more of an adaptation of Faust than Phantom of the Opera, Faust being the opera in the original novel that Christine makes her debut in. Like the 1943 and 1962 versions, this one has the theft of me beautiful music and then I got disfigured thing going on. Unlike in those versions, there's also a selling me soul to Satan thing going on. And yes, this is another fucking version where he becomes disfigured during the plot. His name is Winslow. He's basically if Elton John and Leonard Cohen had a kid. It's debatable whether there is a Raoul in this version. Let's go with no. But there is an antagonist who competes for the love of Phoenix, who is the Christine in this version. And she sucks. This guy is named Swan, and he has more in common with Lord Ambrose in the 1962 version. As for Winslow's character arc, the punishment that he goes through makes his turn to the crazy be more than just being, I'm disfigured. now I'm insane, as we've seen before. The movie does torture him, but the bizarre comedic tone of it, well, I think it makes it work. But even after all of his mad deeds at the end, Winslow basically sacrifices himself for Phoenix and manages to get out of that whole deal with Satin Thing. So he takes it a step further than Book Eric, from letting go the one you love to self-sacrifice. So far, and we will see this also in Part 2, here's two major changes we see all the time. 1. He was not born disfigured, therefore it wasn't a lifetime of crap that made him the way he is, but he just snapped one day. And that he does not let Christine go at the end. So this story is Victorian melodrama. Everyone is a prodigy, and I'm a mad genius, and I am deformed, and I killed people, and oh, my love could crush mountains, and I'm gonna blow up the opera house if you don't marry me right now. Who doesn't relate to that? Seriously, I mean, the premise is kind of out there, but the emotions aren't. This is a story about a deeply toxic relationship and how the two major players mature out of it. And the thing about monsters, movies like to show you that they are bad monsters for a reason, but they also like to punish the monster. Hollywood movies love to reinforce this idea that there are good people, and bad people get punished, which is kind of limiting. Let's say that we all have the potential to be monstrous to varying degrees. Maybe we don't kill people, but being manipulative, jealous, possessive, reclusive, selfish. Those are the traits that made Eric monstrous, and they are also painfully human. Eric is the way he is because his life has sucked. All of it, from start to finish. And that's why I don't like the whole "and then one day I got acid in the face" angle. I think the Brian De Palma version, Phantom of the Paradise, came pretty close to tapping into why this character is engaging. Came pretty whoa. I really believe the rule. But in all of them, something's missing. Something that could really just appeal to every Midwestern mom, every teenage girl. I think we need to take this tragic, emotional breakdown of our character and make him sexy. Now, let it be war upon you both. Or at least 3-2.